Have you ever risked everything to save a life? When homeless 7-year-old Emma found a dying pregnant dog, she had nothing to offer but love. Their journey will touch your heart. Subscribe now and comment where you're watching from. The November air in New Orleans hung heavy with moisture as evening descended on the French Quarter. 7-year-old Emma Matthews pulled her thin, oversized jacket tighter around her small frame, her breath forming little clouds in the fading light. Her copper-colored hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and freckles dotted a face too serious for someone so young. "Grandma Ruth, look," Emma called out, her voice echoing against the brick walls of the alley leading toward the industrial area where they often searched for recyclables. Ruth Matthews straightened her hunched back with effort, joints cracking in protest. At 68, her once elegant posture had been beaten down by years of housekeeping work and, more recently, by homelessness. Her silver hair was neatly braided despite their circumstances, a remnant of her pride. "Emma, stay close. It's getting dark," Ruth called, her southern accent thick with worry. But Emma had already darted ahead toward what appeared to be a heap of dirty rags near the chain-link fence separating them from the landfill. As she approached, the heap moved slightly, and Emma froze. "It's a dog, Grandma, and it's hurt real bad." Ruth hurried over as quickly as her arthritic knees would allow. The German Shepherd lay on its side, ribs protruding painfully through matted fur. Open sores peppered its emaciated body, and one eye was swollen shut. But what struck Emma most was the fear in the animal's remaining eye, a look she recognized all too well. "Don't touch it, child. Could be dangerous," Ruth warned, pulling Emma back by her shoulder. The wail of sirens interrupted them as an animal control van pulled up. 2 officers emerged, their faces grim with the routine of another day collecting strays. "Stand back, folks," the taller officer said, approaching with a catch pole. "We got a call about an injured dog. This one's in bad shape." "What'll happen to her?" Emma asked, noticing the dog was female. The officers exchanged a glance before the shorter one knelt to Emma's level. "Well, sweetheart, when they're this injured, sometimes the kindest thing is to, you're gonna kill her?" Emma's voice cracked. "It's called euthanasia," the officer explained gently. "She's suffering." Emma's eyes welled with tears. "Please don't. Please." As the officers prepared the pole, Emma broke free from Ruth's grasp and approached the dog slowly. "It's okay, girl," she whispered. "I know you're scared." "Emma Matthews." Ruth's voice sharpened with fear. "Get back here this instant." But Emma had already placed her small hand on the dog's side, and to everyone's surprise, the animal didn't growl or snap. She simply whimpered and closed her eyes. "Wait!" Emma suddenly gasped, her hand still on the dog's belly. "She's moving. There's something inside her moving." The officers paused, and the taller one approached cautiously. He placed his gloved hand where Emma indicated and nodded grimly. "She's pregnant. Damn it," he muttered, then caught himself. "Sorry, kid, but this complicates things." "You can't kill her now," Emma pleaded, her voice suddenly strong and unwavering. "You'd be killing her babies too." Ruth sighed, recognizing the determined set of her granddaughter's jaw, a mirror image of her late daughter's. She knew that look meant trouble was coming. "We'll need a vet to check her condition," the officer said, already reaching for his radio. Emma looked up at her grandmother, her green eyes fierce with purpose. "We have to help her, Grandma. We just have to." Dr. James Mitchell arrived within 20 minutes, his veterinary emergency van pulling up next to the animal control vehicle. A tall black man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Dr. Mitchell had been caring for the city's animals for over 30 years. "Let's have a look at our patient," he said calmly, kneeling beside the German Shepherd. His experienced hands moved methodically over her body while Emma watched with intense concentration, refusing to back away despite Ruth's persistent tugging at her sleeve. "She's been severely neglected," Dr. Mitchell confirmed, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Dehydrated, malnourished, and there are signs of physical abuse. But the puppies seem to be intact. I'd estimate she's about 7 weeks along." "Will she make it?" Emma asked, her small voice barely audible. Dr. Mitchell's eyes softened as he looked at the little girl. "She's a fighter. I can tell by the way she's protected those pups despite her condition." He paused, reading the name tag hanging half-torn from the dog's neck. "Grace. Her name is Grace." "Grace," Emma repeated, testing the name. "It fits her." One of the animal control officers approached with a clipboard. "Doc, you know the protocol. She needs to go to the shelter, and given her condition, I know the protocol." "Johnson," Dr. Mitchell interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "But I'm invoking medical necessity. This dog needs immediate specialized care that the shelter can't provide." The officer sighed, clearly uncomfortable with bending rules. "There's something else you should know. We got the call from the Bellamy estate. Apparently, this dog belongs to Nathaniel Bellamy." Ruth gasped. Everyone in New Orleans knew the name. Nathaniel Bellamy, tech mogul turned reclusive millionaire, whose mansion loomed over the Garden District like a modern-day castle. Bellamy. Dr. Mitchell's eyebrows shot up. Then why is his dog in this condition? Word is he's been hospitalized for weeks. "Cancer, they say," the officer explained. "Staff's been running things, and apparently, someone decided a sick dog wasn't worth the vet bills." Emma's face contorted with rage, an expression that looked out of place on her young features. "That's evil. How could they do that to her?" Dr. Mitchell nodded to his assistant, who was already preparing a stretcher. "Let's get her to the clinic. We can sort out ownership later." "What about us?" Emma asked, panic rising in her voice as they began loading Grace into the van. "Can we come see her?" Ruth placed her weathered hands on Emma's shoulders. "We can't afford—" "Of course you can," Dr. Mitchell interrupted, studying the grandmother and child more carefully. Their clothes were clean but worn, and Ruth's eyes carried the weary dignity of someone who had fallen on hard times but was determined to maintain standards. "In fact, I could use a volunteer to sit with her tonight. Dogs do better with a friendly face around." Emma's face lit up, but Ruth shook her head. "We need to get back to our place." Emma finished quickly, shooting her grandmother a warning look. At 7, she already understood the shame Ruth felt about their makeshift shelter beneath the highway overpass, a relatively dry spot they'd claimed after losing their apartment 6 months ago when Ruth's arthritis made it impossible for her to continue housekeeping. Dr. Mitchell pretended not to notice the exchange. "My clinic is warm, and there's a cot in the back room. Emma could keep Grace company, and you could both have a roof over your heads tonight. The weather report says rain is coming." Ruth stiffened, pride warring with practicality. "We ain't charity cases, doctor." "It's not charity, ma'am. It's employment. I'll pay Emma to be my assistant for the night." He winked at Emma. "What do you say, young lady? Want to be a veterinary assistant?" Emma nodded vigorously, her eyes pleading with her grandmother. Ruth sighed, looking up at the darkening sky. "Just for tonight," she conceded. As they climbed into Dr. Mitchell's van, Emma whispered to Grace, her hand gentle on the dog's head, "Don't worry, girl. We're going to take care of you now. You and your babies." Dr. Mitchell's clinic was a modest but immaculate facility on Magazine Street, with walls painted a calming shade of blue and the faint smell of antiseptic mixing with the scent of pet shampoo. After settling Grace in a spacious kennel lined with soft blankets, Dr. Mitchell conducted a more thorough examination while Emma watched attentively from a small stool beside him. "Is that an ultrasound?" Emma asked, pointing to the machine Dr. Mitchell was preparing. "It is," he smiled, impressed by her knowledge. "We're going to check on the puppies." Ruth sat in the corner, her hands folded tightly in her lap, uncomfortable with accepting help but unwilling to separate Emma from the dog that had so quickly captured her heart. As the ultrasound wand moved over Grace's distended belly, Dr. Mitchell's eyebrows rose dramatically. "Well, I'll be damned. Excuse my language," he added, glancing at Emma. "What is it?" Emma asked, craning her neck to see the grainy black and white image on the screen. "This dog," Dr. Mitchell said slowly, "isn't just any German Shepherd. See these bone structures? The cranial formation? This is a Grafenhof bloodline, one of the most prestigious pedigrees in the world. These puppies could be worth thousands each." Ruth's head snapped up. "Thousands?" Dr. Mitchell nodded, his expression serious. "If they survive, and if Grace survives the birth, she's in rough shape." He carefully cleaned the gel from Grace's belly while the dog watched him with wary but gradually trusting eyes. "How did someone let a dog like this get so sick?" Emma asked, gently stroking Grace's head. Dr. Mitchell sighed. "People can be cruel, Emma, or neglectful. Sometimes both. Bellamy wouldn't mistreat a valuable dog," Ruth said thoughtfully. "He's known for collecting expensive things. This doesn't add up." Dr. Mitchell nodded in agreement. "I'm going to make some calls." He paused, studying Ruth. Mrs. Matthews, would you mind telling me more about your situation? I gather you and Emma aren't staying somewhere permanent right now. Ruth stiffened. We get by. Grandma, Emma pleaded. Maybe Dr. Mitchell can help. Ruth's lips pressed into a thin line, but the exhaustion of maintaining pride finally gave way. My daughter, Emma's mama, died 3 years ago. Cancer, like they say Bellamy has. I was working housekeeping at the Monteleone Hotel until my arthritis got too bad. We lost our apartment 6 months ago. Her voice cracked slightly. I collect recyclables. It ain't much, but it keeps us fed. Dr. Mitchell nodded. No pity in his expression, only respect. Thank you for trusting me with that. I might have a proposition for you both. Before he could elaborate, the clinic door chimed, and a tall, elegant woman in an expensive pantsuit strode in. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her heels clicked sharply on the tile floor. I'm Victoria Hargrove, Mr. Bellamy's personal assistant, she announced without preamble. I understand you have his property. Dr. Mitchell stepped forward, positioning himself between the newcomer and Grace. Ms. Hargrove, I was about to contact the Bellamy estate. This dog has been severely neglected. She's pregnant and in critical condition. Victoria's expression remained impassive. An unfortunate situation. One of the groundskeepers was supposed to be caring for her while Mr. Bellamy is receiving treatment. Clearly, he failed in his duties. She opened her designer handbag and withdrew a checkbook. Mr. Bellamy is quite fond of the animal. I'm authorized to offer compensation for your troubles and to reclaim his property. Emma moved closer to Grace, her small body tense with alarm. She's not property. She's alive, and she's hurt, and somebody did this to her on purpose. Victoria's cold gaze shifted to Emma, then to Ruth. And you are? The people who found Grace abandoned by a landfill, Ruth replied, rising to her feet despite the pain in her joints. And we'd like to know how that happened if Mr. Bellamy is so fond of her. Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. I don't answer to concerned citizens who saved a valuable dog's life. Dr. Mitchell finished firmly. Actually, I think you do, especially since I'm obligated to report animal abuse to the authorities. Victoria's composed facade cracked slightly. $10,000, she said, writing on the checkbook. For your troubles and discretion. Ruth's eyes widened at the amount. $10,000 could secure housing, food, stability, all the things she'd been unable to provide Emma since their world collapsed. Grandma, no. Emma whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Grace needs us. Thunder rumbled in the distance as rain began pattering against the clinic's windows. New Orleans weather could turn on a dime, especially during hurricane season's tail end. Inside, the atmosphere was equally charged as Victoria Hargrove held out the check, her red-lacquered nails gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Ruth stared at the check, her weathered hands trembling slightly. $10,000. Enough to start over. Enough for a security deposit on an apartment, for warm clothes for Emma, for stability. Mrs. Matthews, Victoria said smoothly, I understand your situation is difficult. This amount could change things for you and your granddaughter. All we require is the return of Mr. Bellamy's property and your discretion regarding her condition. She's not property, Emma repeated, her voice rising. She stood protectively next to Grace's kennel, her small hand resting on the dog's head. She's scared and hurt, and she has babies inside her. Dr. Mitchell cleared his throat. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Miss Hargrove. Under Louisiana's animal welfare laws, I'm required to report suspected abuse or neglect. Grace was found in life-threatening condition. Before releasing her to anyone, I need proof of ownership and assurance of proper care. Victoria's perfectly composed expression faltered for just a second. I'll have the papers sent over tomorrow. As for her care, Mr. Bellamy has a state-of-the-art kennel facility on his estate and access to the finest veterinary care. The same care that let her end up by a landfill. Emma challenged, showing a boldness that surprised even Ruth. Victoria's gaze turned icy. Watch your tone, young lady. Adults are speaking. She has a point, Dr. Mitchell said, crossing his arms. Someone at the Bellamy estate is responsible for this dog's condition. I can't in good conscience release her until I know she'll be safe. The storm outside intensified, rain now lashing against the windows as lightning flashed. Victoria glanced at her watch impatiently. Look, she said, her voice hardening. I don't have time for this. Mr. Bellamy is extremely ill, and the last thing he needs is the stress of legal action over a dog. 20,000. Final offer. Ruth gasped softly. $20,000. It was more money than she'd seen in years. Grandma, please, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. Don't let her take Grace. Ruth looked at her granddaughter, really looked at her. Emma had lost so much in her short life. Her mother, her home, her sense of security. Yet here she stood, fighting not for herself, but for a broken creature who needed protection. In that moment, Ruth saw not just her granddaughter, but her late daughter's spirit shining through. We ain't selling her to you, Ruth said firmly, straightening her spine despite the arthritis pain. Not for any amount. Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. You're making a mistake. I could have you investigated for trespassing on Bellamy property to steal a valuable dog. That's quite enough, Dr. Mitchell interjected. No one stole anything. Animal Control has already filed a report stating where Grace was found and in what condition. Now, I suggest you leave before I call the police to file a harassment complaint. Victoria's face flushed with anger, but she maintained her composure. This isn't over, she said, returning the checkbook to her purse. I'll be back tomorrow with ownership papers and legal representation. Enjoy your night with the dog. It will be your last. With that, she turned on her heel and strode out, the door slamming behind her. The moment she left, the tension in Emma's small body released, and she burst into tears, burying her face in Grace's fur. The dog, despite her own pain, gently licked Emma's arm. You did right, Dr. Mitchell said softly to Ruth. Something's not adding up about that woman or this situation. Ruth nodded, though her eyes betrayed her worry. We may have just turned down our only chance at getting back on our feet. Outside, the storm had intensified to a torrential downpour. Dr. Mitchell looked out the window with concern. You two should definitely stay here tonight. I'll make up the cot in the back room, and there's a pull-out couch in my office. What about our things? Emma asked, wiping her tears. Ruth and Dr. Mitchell exchanged a look, both understanding what things meant, the few precious possessions they had managed to keep in their makeshift shelter under the overpass. Where exactly are you staying? Dr. Mitchell asked gently. Ruth hesitated before answering. Claiborne Underpass. We've got a spot behind the concrete barrier. It's dry mostly. Dr. Mitchell's expression softened with understanding rather than pity. I'll drive you there to collect your belongings. This storm's only going to get worse. As if to confirm his words, a crash of thunder shook the building, causing the lights to flicker momentarily. Grace whimpered, pressing closer to Emma. It's okay, girl, Emma whispered, her face still wet with tears but her voice steady. I won't let anyone hurt you again. I promise. The storm raged through the night, transforming the streets of New Orleans into glistening rivers. By morning, reports of flooding in the lower-lying areas had already begun circulating. Dr. Mitchell's clinic, fortunately situated on higher ground, remained dry, though the power had flickered throughout the night. Emma awoke curled next to Grace's kennel, her hand still resting through the bars on the dog's fur. Dr. Mitchell had tried to convince her to use the cot, but she had refused to leave Grace's side, afraid the dog would feel abandoned again. Morning, sweet pea, Ruth said softly, approaching with a paper cup of steaming tea. Her joints were particularly painful this morning. Damp weather always made her arthritis flare, but she moved with determined dignity. Emma sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Is Grace okay? Dr. Mitchell checked on her twice during the night. Said she's holding steady. The veterinarian himself appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, and concern etched on his face. Ladies, I've just gotten some troubling news. The Claiborne Underpass is completely flooded. There's at least 3 feet of water where your spot was. Ruth closed her eyes briefly, absorbing yet another loss. The plastic tub containing their few remaining possessions, photos of Emma's mother, Ruth's wedding ring, the patchwork quilt Emma's mother had made, was surely underwater now. Everything's gone, Emma asked in a small voice. Dr. Mitchell nodded solemnly. I'm afraid so. I'm so sorry. Ruth squared her shoulders. We've started over before. We can do it again. But the tremor in her voice betrayed her uncertainty. Actually, Dr. Mitchell said, pulling up a chair, I received another call this morning that might interest you. Miss Lillian Carter, do you know her? Ruth's eyebrows rose in recognition. The prayer lady? lives in that little yellow house on Frenchman Street. That's her. Apparently, word has gotten around about Grace. Miss Lillian called offering her spare room for you and Emma. Said something about it being a sign from above that needed answering. Miss Lillian Carter was something of a local legend in their neighborhood. An elderly woman known for her fervent prayers, traditional Southern remedies, and uncanny ability to appear whenever someone was in need. Some called her a busybody, others a guardian angel. We can't impose, Ruth began automatically. Grandma, Emma interrupted with unexpected firmness. We don't have anywhere else to go, and I need to stay close to Grace. Dr. Mitchell leaned forward. Ruth, I've known Lillian for 20 years. She's good people, and she means it when she offers help. Plus, he added with a slight smile, she's made the best peach cobbler in the state since 1975. A hint of a smile crossed Ruth's tired face. That she does. What about Grace? Emma asked, turning to look at the German shepherd, who was watching their conversation with intelligent eyes. Dr. Mitchell's expression grew more serious. I wanted to talk to you both about that. I did some research last night after our visitor left. Grace's pedigree is even more significant than I initially thought. She's from a line of show champions worth small fortunes. Is that why Victoria wants her back so badly? Emma asked. Possibly, but there's something else. Dr. Mitchell hesitated. I performed an EKG while you were sleeping, Emma. Grace has a heart condition, likely congenital, made worse by the neglect. The pregnancy is putting additional strain on her system. What does that mean? Ruth asked, seeing the fear blooming in Emma's eyes. It means, Dr. Mitchell said gently, that delivering the puppies could be dangerous for her. We'll need to monitor her closely and possibly perform a C-section when the time comes. Will she die? Emma's voice was barely audible. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen, Dr. Mitchell promised, though they all heard what he didn't say. There were no guarantees. The clinic door chimed, and Miss Lillian herself bustled in, a diminutive black woman in her 70s with cloud-white hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through pretense. There you are, she announced, as if she'd been looking everywhere for them. I've got the room all ready, and a pot of gumbo simmering. You'll come straight home with me, Ruth Matthews, you and that child both. Ruth started to protest, but Miss Lillian waved it away. Don't you, but Miss Lillian me. The Lord put it on my heart to help, and I aim to do just that. Her gaze softened as it landed on Emma. Child, you look like you've been carrying the weight of the world. Let's lighten that load a bit. Miss Lillian then turned her attention to Grace, approaching the kennel with surprising agility for her age. She studied the dog for a long moment. This one's got a purpose, she declared with absolute certainty. The good Lord don't save creatures without reason. She came to you for healing, but you mark my words, she'll do some healing of her own before this is through. Emma looked up at the elderly woman with wide eyes. You think Grace will be okay? Miss Lillian placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. I think, child, that faith can move mountains. And looking at how you care for this dog, I'd say there's plenty of faith in this room. Miss Lillian's house on Frenchman Street was a shotgun-style home, painted a cheerful yellow with periwinkle blue trim. Unlike many of the gentrified properties in the area, it remained authentic to its historical roots, with a small front porch adorned with potted ferns and a rocking chair that had witnessed decades of neighborhood comings and goings. Inside, the home smelled of simmering gumbo and lemon furniture polish. The spare room she offered Ruth and Emma was small but immaculate, with a full-sized bed covered in a handmade quilt and curtains that filtered the morning light into a soft glow. It ain't much, Miss Lillian said as she showed them in, but it's dry and it's safe. It's beautiful, Emma whispered, running her hand over the quilt's intricate pattern. Ruth stood awkwardly in the doorway, unaccustomed to accepting charity. Miss Lillian, we can't thank you enough, but we need to figure out how to contribute. I can clean, cook. Lord have mercy, Ruth Matthews, Miss Lillian interrupted. I've been taking care of myself for 40 years since Herbert passed. What I need isn't a housekeeper. She looked meaningfully at Emma, who was exploring the room with cautious excitement. What I need is to hear a child's voice in this house again. My grandchildren are all grown and moved away. This old house gets too quiet sometimes. Before Ruth could respond, Miss Lillian's phone rang. She answered, listened briefly, then turned to them with raised eyebrows. That was James Mitchell. Says that fancy woman is back at the clinic with some lawyer in a $1,000 suit. They're demanding the dog. Emma's face crumpled. No, they can't take Grace. Get your shoes, Ruth said decisively. We're going back to the clinic. 20 minutes later, they arrived to find Dr. Mitchell in a tense standoff with Victoria Hargrove and a sleek man in an expertly tailored suit. Grace was awake in her kennel, sensing the tension and watching warily. Ah, here they are, Victoria said coldly when they entered. The homeless child and her grandmother who think they've found a meal ticket. That's enough, Victoria, the lawyer said smoothly, stepping forward with an extended hand. Mrs. Matthews, I'm Harrison Wells, representing the Bellamy estate. I understand you found Mr. Bellamy's dog, and we're grateful. However, we now need to reclaim his property. He held out a folder containing legal documents. These papers confirm Mr. Bellamy's ownership of the German Shepherd registered as Grafenhof's Amazing Grace. As you can see, the purchase date was 3 years ago, and the microchip number matches. Dr. Mitchell took the papers, examining them carefully. These appear to be in order, he admitted reluctantly. Emma pushed forward. But they hurt her. They left her to die. That's a serious accusation, young lady, Harrison Wells said, his tone condescending. Do you have any proof? The dog's condition is proof enough, Dr. Mitchell interjected. She was found severely neglected and abused. A tragic situation indeed, Wells agreed smoothly. But Mr. Bellamy has been hospitalized for weeks. It appears a staff member failed in their duties. That staff member has been terminated, and arrangements have been made for proper care going forward. Ruth studied Victoria's face, noticing something she hadn't before. If Mr. Bellamy is so concerned about his dog, why isn't he here himself? Why send his assistant? Victoria's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Mr. Bellamy is undergoing treatment. He's in no condition to care for a sick, pregnant dog, Miss Lillian finished, her usually warm voice now hard as steel. So what happens to Grace when you take her back? Who's going to sit with her all night when she's afraid? Who's going to talk to those puppies so they know there's love waiting for them in this world? The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. I assure you, the Bellamy estate has excellent kennel facilities and staff. The same staff that abandoned her. Emma challenged, tears streaming down her face. There was a moment of awkward silence before Victoria stepped forward, her patience clearly wearing thin. This has gone on long enough. We have legal documentation of ownership. The dog comes with us now, or we'll be forced to involve the police. Dr. Mitchell looked at the papers again, searching for any inconsistency or loophole. Finding none, he sighed heavily. I'm afraid they're right. Legally, they own Grace. Emma let out a sob and rushed to Grace's kennel, dropping to her knees beside it. You promised, she whispered to the dog. You promised you'd be okay. Grace whimpered softly, pressing her nose against Emma's hand through the bars. Victoria motioned to a man waiting by the door, a burly individual who stepped forward with a leash and collar. Wait, a new voice called from the clinic entrance. Everyone turned to see a slight man in his early 30s wearing muddy work boots and faded jeans. His face was deeply tanned from outdoor work, and his hands bore the calluses of physical labor. Miguel, Dr. Mitchell said in surprise. What are you doing here? I heard about the German Shepherd, the man said, his accent revealing Central American origins. I had to come. He looked directly at Victoria, whose face had gone suddenly pale. You should not be here, Miss Hargrove. Who is this person? Wells demanded. Miguel Fuentes, the man introduced himself. I worked as gardener at Bellamy Estate for 5 years. Until 3 weeks ago, when Ms. Hargrove fired me. Victoria's composure cracked visibly. This is irrelevant. He was terminated for incompetence. I was fired, Miguel continued steadily, because I refused to abandon the dog. Ms. Hargrove ordered me to get rid of the sick mutt because the vet bills were too expensive while Mr. Bellamy was away. A stunned silence fell over the room. That's absurd, Victoria finally sputtered. You have no proof. Miguel reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I record all instructions from management. For my protection. He pressed play, and Victoria's unmistakable voice filled the room. Just dump the dog somewhere far from the estate. It's going to die anyway, and those vet bills are ridiculous. Mr. Bellamy will never know. He's too sick to ask about a dog. The lawyer's face had turned to stone as he slowly turned to face Victoria. Miss Hargrove, is this accurate? Victoria's perfectly composed facade finally shattered. Nathaniel Bellamy is dying. He's not coming back from this. That dog and her pedigree puppies are worth a fortune that no one would miss. The clinic fell into shocked silence after Victoria's outburst. Even Grace seemed to understand the gravity of the moment, her amber eyes fixed on the woman who had ordered her abandonment. The lawyer, Harrison Wells, was the first to recover. "Ms. Hargrove," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "I suggest you wait outside while I make a call to Mr. Bellamy's personal physician." Victoria's face drained of color. "Harrison, be reasonable. Nathaniel is terminally ill. He has stage 4. Mr. Bellamy has stage 2 pancreatic cancer." Wells interrupted sharply. "Aggressive, yes. Terminal? Not necessarily. His prognosis has improved significantly in the past week, which you would know if you'd attended the medical briefing instead of visiting high-end puppy brokers." He pulled out his phone. "Outside, Victoria. Now." As Victoria stormed out, Wells turned to the others. "I sincerely apologize for this situation. I assure you, Mr. Bellamy had no knowledge of what happened to Grace. He's been asking about her, but Victoria told him the dog was being well cared for at the estate." Emma, still kneeling beside Grace's kennel, looked up at the lawyer with tear-stained cheeks. "Does that mean Grace can stay with us?" Wells hesitated. "The situation is complicated. Legally, Grace still belongs to Mr. Bellamy. However," he added quickly, seeing Emma's face crumple, "given the circumstances, I'm certain we can come to an arrangement that benefits everyone, especially Grace." Dr. Mitchell stepped forward. "What kind of arrangement?" "Let me speak with Mr. Bellamy first," Wells said. "He should be informed of what's happened and make the decision himself." He looked at Miguel. "Mr. Fuentes, would you be willing to come with me? Mr. Bellamy would want to hear your account directly." Miguel nodded. "Of course. I always respected Mr. Bellamy. He was a good employer." As the two men prepared to leave, Wells turned back. "Dr. Mitchell, what is your professional opinion about moving Grace right now?" "Absolutely not advisable," Dr. Mitchell said firmly. "She's stabilized here, but she's still in a fragile condition. The stress of transport could endanger both her and the puppies." Wells nodded. "Then she stays here for now? I'll be in touch by this evening." After they left, Emma collapsed against Ruth, the emotional strain finally taking its toll. "Are they going to take her away, Grandma?" Ruth stroked Emma's copper hair. "I don't know, sweet pea, but that lawyer seemed like a decent man. And now he knows the truth." Miss Lillian, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the confrontation, finally spoke. "Truth has a way of coming to light, child. Like cream rising to the top." She approached Grace's kennel and studied the dog with her penetrating gaze. "This one's journey ain't over yet. The Lord didn't bring her this far to abandon her now." Dr. Mitchell checked Grace's vitals once more. "She's doing better today. The 4 fluids and antibiotics are helping." He looked at Emma with gentle eyes. "Would you like to come in and sit with her for a while? She seems calmer when you're close." Emma nodded eagerly, and Dr. Mitchell opened the kennel door. With careful movements, Emma settled beside Grace, who immediately laid her head in the child's lap. "She trusts you," Dr. Mitchell observed. "That's remarkable, considering what she's been through." "She knows I'd never hurt her," Emma said simply, stroking the dog's ears. Ruth watched her granddaughter with mixed emotions. The bond between Emma and Grace was undeniable, but Ruth worried about the heartbreak that might come if they were separated. They had already lost so much. "James," Miss Lillian said quietly to Dr. Mitchell, "that dog needs round-the-clock care, doesn't she?" Dr. Mitchell nodded. "Ideally, yes, especially as her delivery date approaches. And you need someone to help at the clinic, with all the animals coming in after the flooding?" Dr. Mitchell raised an eyebrow, sensing where Miss Lillian was heading. "I could certainly use an extra pair of hands." Miss Lillian turned to Ruth. "Seems to me there's a solution here that helps everybody. You need work, James needs help, and that dog needs people who care about her." Ruth looked uncertain. "Miss Lillian, I don't have veterinary training. But you have 30 years of caregiving experience," Dr. Mitchell pointed out. "First as a mother, then in housekeeping and elder care. The technical aspects I can teach. The compassion and dedication, those you already have in abundance." For the first time in months, a flicker of hope lit in Ruth's eyes. "You're offering me a job?" "A real one," Dr. Mitchell confirmed. "Fair pay, flexible hours to accommodate your arthritis, and Emma can come after school. She's got a natural gift with animals." "School," Ruth murmured, the word a painful reminder of another normality they'd lost. Emma had been missing classes since they'd lost their apartment, Ruth too ashamed to send her from their makeshift shelter under the overpass. Dr. Mitchell seemed to read her thoughts. One step at a time, Ruth. A job first, then we figure out the rest. Before Ruth could respond, the clinic door opened again, and Harrison Wells returned, this time accompanied by a thin man in a wheelchair. Despite his gaunt appearance and the beanie covering what was clearly a head left bald by chemotherapy, Nathaniel Bellamy carried himself with unmistakable authority. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, immediately found Grace and Emma in the kennel. So there you are, Grace, he said, his voice surprisingly strong despite his frail appearance. And who's your new friend? Emma froze, her arms protectively around Grace's neck. Bellamy wheeled himself closer, his expression softening as he observed the pair. Don't be afraid, young lady. I'm not here to separate you. You're not? Emma asked cautiously. No. Bellamy shook his head. Mr. Wells and Mr. Fuentes have explained everything. It seems I've been kept in the dark about many things while I've been ill. His gaze hardened momentarily before returning to Emma. What's your name? Emma Matthews, sir. And this is my grandma Ruth. Bellamy nodded respectfully to Ruth before returning his attention to Emma. Well, Emma Matthews, it appears you've done what my entire staff couldn't or wouldn't do. You saved Grace's life. How can I ever repay such a debt? The question hung in the air, weighted with possibility. Everyone watched as Emma, small but suddenly appearing very wise, considered her answer carefully. You could let her stay with people who love her, she said finally, her voice clear and unwavering. Nathaniel Bellamy studied Emma for a long moment, his eyes revealing intelligence sharpened by years of business negotiations. But there was something else there too, a vulnerability that his illness had perhaps brought to the surface. People who love her, he repeated thoughtfully. Yes, that would be important, wouldn't it? He wheeled himself closer to the kennel, stopping at a respectful distance when Grace tensed slightly. She doesn't quite trust me anymore. She's been hurt, Emma explained, her hand steadying on Grace's head. Dr. Mitchell says it will take time for her to trust people again. Dr. Mitchell is right, Bellamy nodded. He turned to the veterinarian. May I have a full report on her condition? Dr. Mitchell described Grace's health issues in detail, the malnutrition, dehydration, external wounds, and most critically, the heart condition that complicated her pregnancy. And the puppies? Bellamy asked. 6, possibly 7 from the ultrasound. If all goes well, they should be born in about 2 months. Bellamy absorbed this information, his thin fingers tapping against the arm of his wheelchair. 2 months, he murmured. That coincides with my final treatment cycle. He looked up at Harrison Wells. Have you drawn up the paperwork I requested? Wells nodded, producing a folder from his briefcase. As instructed, sir. Bellamy turned back to Ruth and Emma. Mrs. Matthews, I understand you're currently staying with Miss Lillian. Is that correct? Ruth nodded cautiously. Yes, sir. She's been kind enough to take us in after the flooding. And before that, you were. He hesitated delicately. Homeless, Ruth supplied, refusing to hide behind euphemisms. After I couldn't work anymore. We had a spot under the Claiborne overpass. Bellamy's face showed genuine regret. I'm sorry to hear that. New Orleans fails too many of its hard-working people. He gestured to Wells, who handed him the folder. Mrs. Matthews, what I have here is a proposal. I'd like you to take your time reviewing it with legal counsel of your own choosing, which I'll provide if needed. He handed the folder to Ruth, who opened it with slightly trembling hands. In essence, Bellamy continued, I'm offering you a position on my estate. The groundskeeper's cottage has been vacant since Miguel was wrongfully terminated. It's a 2-bedroom home with its own garden space. The position would involve caring for my animal companions, currently just Grace and her forthcoming puppies, though I've always been fond of rescues. Ruth looked up from the papers in shock. You're offering us a home? And a job? With full benefits, including health insurance, Bellamy confirmed. The salary is detailed there on page 3. Ruth's eyes widened as she saw the figure, substantially more than she'd earned in her previous positions. As for Grace, Bellamy continued, turning to Emma. I remain her legal owner, but I'm proposing a shared guardianship arrangement. She'll live with you in the cottage, where you'll be her primary caregiver. In exchange, I ask for visitation rights. Emma's face brightened, but then clouded with confusion. Visitation rights? Bellamy's lips curved in a small smile. I'd like to visit with Grace occasionally, when I'm feeling well enough. She was a great comfort to me before. He gestured vaguely to his frail body. Well, before all this. You really do care about her, Emma said, a statement rather than a question. I do, Bellamy confirmed, which is why I'm horrified by what happened to her. Victoria, his face darkened. She took advantage of my illness and isolation. That won't happen again. What will happen to her? Dr. Mitchell asked. Victoria, I mean. She's been terminated, effective immediately, Wells answered briskly. And there will be legal consequences for her actions. Miss Lillian, who had been observing quietly, finally spoke up. This all sounds mighty generous, Mr. Bellamy. What's the catch? Bellamy didn't seem offended by her directness. A fair question, Miss Lillian. I suppose the catch is that I'm a dying man trying to set some things right. He held up a hand when Ruth began to protest. Stage 2 can become stage 4 very quickly with pancreatic cancer. I'm fighting, but I'm also realistic. He turned back to Emma, his expression softening. I built a fortune creating technology that connects people, yet I've spent years isolating myself. The irony isn't lost on me. He gestured toward Grace. This dog was my only consistent companion for the past 3 years. Watching you with her makes me realize what's been missing in my life. Genuine connection, compassion without agenda. Emma processed this with the straightforward wisdom of childhood. So you'll be Grace's other person, and we'll take care of her together? Precisely, Bellamy nodded. And should my condition worsen, you'll ensure she's loved for the rest of her days. He turned to Ruth. What do you say, Mrs. Matthews? Is this arrangement acceptable? Ruth looked from the contract to Emma, whose eyes were pleading, to Miss Lillian, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of approval. Mr. Bellamy, this is overwhelming, Ruth admitted. We'd need to see the cottage, understand exactly what the job entails. Of course, Bellamy agreed readily. No decisions need to be made today. Take the contract, review it, visit the cottage. All I ask is that you consider it seriously. Ruth nodded, still somewhat dazed by this unexpected turn of events. We will. Excellent. Bellamy turned his wheelchair toward the door where his driver waited. Dr. Mitchell, I assume Grace needs to remain under your care for the time being? At least until she's more stable. Yes, Dr. Mitchell confirmed. Then I'll cover all expenses for her treatment, of course. He looked at Emma once more. Would it be all right if I came to visit her tomorrow? Emma nodded. I think she'd like that. I can show you how she likes her ears scratched. A genuine smile transformed Bellamy's tired face. I'd appreciate that lesson very much, Emma. He extended his hand, which Emma shook solemnly. It seems we have a deal. As Bellamy was helped back into his vehicle, Miss Lillian shook her head in wonderment. Lord works in mysterious ways, she murmured. A week ago, you two were under a bridge, and that dog was left for dead. Now look at y'all. Ruth clutched the folder containing the contract, hope and wariness battling in her expression. It seems too good to be true. Sometimes, Ruth Matthews, Miss Lillian said firmly, good things happen because they're meant to. Plain and simple. Dr. Mitchell checked his watch. Grace needs her medication, and I need to do afternoon rounds. Emma, would you like to help? Emma nodded eagerly, giving Grace a gentle hug before stepping out of the kennel. I'll be right back, girl, she promised. As she followed Dr. Mitchell to prepare Grace's treatment, Emma felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. The lightness of possibility, the sense that tomorrow might actually be better than today. The groundskeeper's cottage on the Bellamy estate exceeded Ruth's most optimistic expectations. Set apart from the main mansion, the two-bedroom home featured a spacious kitchen with updated appliances, a cozy living room with a brick fireplace, and windows that flooded the space with natural light. The backyard, though modest, included a small garden area and a covered patio perfect for evening relaxation. It's beautiful, Emma whispered as they toured the property 3 days after meeting Nathaniel Bellamy. Her eyes were wide with disbelief as she explored what might become their new home. Ruth ran her hand along the solid oak kitchen counter, trying to maintain her composure. It had been months since they'd had a proper roof over their heads, and years since they'd lived anywhere this nice. Harrison Wells, who was conducting the tour, smiled at their reactions. The cottage was renovated about 5 years ago, but hasn't been occupied since Miguel left. Mr. Bellamy wants you to feel free to make it your own, paint colors, furniture arrangements, whatever you need. This is more than generous, Ruth said, still struggling to believe their change in fortune. I just want to be clear about my responsibilities. Wells nodded. Of course. The job has three main components. First, caring for Grace and her puppies once they're born. Second, overseeing the small animal sanctuary Mr. Bellamy wishes to establish on the property, primarily rescue dogs and cats, nothing exotic. Third, some light gardening maintenance for this section of the grounds. But my arthritis, Ruth began, concern creasing her brow. Mr. Bellamy is aware of your condition, Wells assured her. The gardening would be minimal, mostly supervision of the grounds crew when they come weekly. Your primary focus would be the animals. And, he added with a smile toward Emma, we understand you'll have an enthusiastic assistant. Emma nodded vigorously. I can help after school. The mention of school brought another worry to Ruth's mind. Speaking of which, Emma hasn't been enrolled since we lost our apartment. The paperwork, the address requirements. Already taken care of, Wells said smoothly. If you accept the position, Emma can be enrolled at Lafayette Academy by next week. It's an excellent school, and Mr. Bellamy sits on their board of trustees. Ruth felt overwhelmed by the rapid solutions to problems that had seemed insurmountable just days ago. Mr. Wells, why is Mr. Bellamy doing all this? It seems like so much for a dog and two strangers. Wells's professional demeanor softened slightly. Mrs. Matthews, I've worked with Nathaniel Bellamy for 15 years. He's always been a shrewd businessman, but fundamentally decent. This illness. He paused, choosing his words carefully. It's forced him to reevaluate his priorities. What happened with Grace was a wake-up call about how isolated he's become. He gestured around the cottage. This isn't charity in his mind. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. You gain stability. He gains peace of mind knowing Grace is cared for by people who genuinely love her. And, he added with a knowing look at Emma, I suspect he's rather taken with your granddaughter's forthright nature. Emma, who had been exploring the second bedroom, returned with excitement. Grandma, there's a window seat in my room. Can we take the job? Please. Ruth looked at her granddaughter's hopeful face, then back at Wells. We'll need a day to think it over properly. But, she added, seeing Emma's face fall, I'm inclined to say yes. At the clinic, Grace continued to improve under Dr. Mitchell's care. The antibiotics had cleared her infections, proper nutrition was restoring her coat's luster, and her eyes now held a spark of life that had been missing when they found her. Nathaniel Bellamy visited daily, usually in the afternoons when his energy was highest after morning treatments. Initially awkward with Emma, he gradually warmed to her curious questions and straightforward observations. For her part, Emma discovered that beneath his reserved exterior, Bellamy possessed a dry wit and genuine interest in her thoughts. So you invented the messaging app that everyone uses? Emma asked during one visit, sitting cross-legged beside Grace's kennel while Bellamy carefully fed the dog treats. Connect me? Yes, though the original programming team deserves much of the credit, Bellamy replied. I had the concept, but they made it work. My mom used to use that all the time, Emma said, a shadow crossing her face. Before she got sick. Bellamy regarded her thoughtfully. You miss her very much, don't you? Emma nodded, absently stroking Grace's ear. Every day? Sometimes I worry I'll forget what she looked like, or how her voice sounded. I understand, Bellamy said quietly. I lost my wife to ovarian cancer 8 years ago. The fear of forgetting is real. Does it get easier? Emma asked, her voice small. Bellamy considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Not easier exactly. Different. The sharp pain becomes more manageable, and sometimes you'll find yourself smiling at a memory before you realize you're crying. Emma nodded, appreciating his honesty. That's how it feels when I think about Mom making pancakes on Sundays. Happy and sad at the same time. Exactly, Bellamy agreed. After a moment, he added, if you decide to come work at the estate, I have some technology that might help. Software that preserves photos, enhances old recordings. Perhaps we could restore some memories of your mother for you. Emma's eyes widened. You do that? Of course. Though I understand your grandmother still needs to make her decision. He glanced at his watch. Speaking of which, isn't she meeting with her lawyer today to review the contract? Emma nodded. Miss Lillian's lawyer friend. She said he's sharper than a tack and twice as pointy. Bellamy chuckled, a sound that seemed to surprise even him. A colorful description. I look forward to his feedback. At that moment, the clinic door opened, and Ruth entered with Miss Lillian. Both women's expressions were unreadable as they approached. Mr. Bellamy, Ruth began formally. I've reviewed the contract with legal counsel. Bellamy straightened in his wheelchair, his face returning to its usual composed state. And we have 3 amendments, Ruth said, handing him a folder. First, healthcare coverage must explicitly include Emma's asthma medication. Second, I'd like an education fund established for Emma's future college expenses to be funded from my salary, not as an additional benefit. Third, I'd like a 3-month trial period where either party can terminate the arrangement without penalty. Bellamy accepted the folder, a hint of admiration in his eyes as he scanned the proposed changes. These are all reasonable requests, Mrs. Matthews. I'll have Harrison draw up the revised contract immediately. He looked up at her. Does this mean you're accepting the position? Ruth glanced at Emma, who was practically vibrating with hope, then back to Bellamy. Yes, Mr. Bellamy. We accept. Emma let out a whoop of joy that startled Grace, who gave a surprised bark in response. When can we move in? Emma asked excitedly. The cottage is ready whenever you are, Bellamy replied. Though I understand Dr. Mitchell recommends Grace remain here for another week or so. Dr. Mitchell, who had been observing from nearby, nodded confirmation. She's doing well, but I'd like to monitor her a bit longer before she's moved. Then we'll move in next weekend, Ruth decided. That gives us time to properly thank Miss Lillian for her hospitality and get Emma enrolled in school. Miss Lillian sniffed dismissively. Ain't no thanks needed, Ruth Matthews. Just you bringing that child by for Sunday dinners now, and then we'll be plenty. As they finalized the details, Emma returned to Grace's side, leaning close to whisper in the dog's ear. We're going to have a real home, Grace. All of us together. Grace responded by gently licking Emma's cheek, her eyes reflecting a trust that had been hard-won but was now firmly established. For perhaps the first time since they'd found her, the German Shepherd completely relaxed, resting her head in Emma's lap with a contented sigh that seemed to say, Finally, I am safe. 8 months later, the gardens of the Bellamy estate bloomed with early summer flowers, their vibrant colors matching the festive atmosphere of the day. Red, white, and blue bunting hung from the trees in celebration of the 4th of July weekend, and folding chairs had been arranged in a semicircle on the main lawn. A small stage draped with a banner reading, New Orleans Animal Welfare Foundation Inaugural Benefit, stood ready for the afternoon ceremony. Inside the groundskeeper's cottage, Emma adjusted her new dress, a pretty blue sundress that complemented her copper hair, which had grown longer and healthier in the months since they'd moved in. At 12 years old, she stood a bit taller now, her freckled face showing the confidence that comes from stability and purpose. Emma, Ruth called from the kitchen. Mr. Bellamy's car just pulled up. Are you and Grace ready? Almost, Emma replied, kneeling to secure the special bandana around Grace's neck, a silky blue fabric embroidered with tiny gold stars. The German Shepherd, now robust and healthy, sat patiently as Emma fussed with the fabric. Her coat gleamed in the morning sunlight streaming through the bedroom window, a far cry from the matted, dull fur she'd had when they found her. You look beautiful, Emma told her, running a gentle hand along the dog's side, where a scar from her C-section was the only visible reminder of her difficult past. Everyone's going to love you. Grace responded with a soft woof and nudged Emma's hand with her nose, a gesture that had become their private form of communication over the months. From the living room came the sound of excited yipping as the 6 puppies Grace had delivered 3 months earlier competed for attention. The birth had been difficult, requiring Dr. Mitchell to perform an emergency C-section, but both mother and puppies had survived thanks to his skill and the round-the-clock care provided by Ruth, Emma, and even Nathaniel Bellamy, who had spent several nights in the cottage's spare room to help with the newborns. Someone needs to settle those pups down before they tear up my good pillows, Ruth called, though her tone held more affection than annoyance. At 69, Ruth moved more easily these days. Regular medical care had improved her arthritis management, and the physical activity of caring for the animals had strengthened her once stiff joints. Coming, Emma led Grace out to the living room, where the puppies, now substantial in size, immediately swarmed their mother. All 6 showed Grace's intelligence and gentle temperament, though their markings varied, revealing the mixed heritage of their unknown father. Each puppy now had a forever home waiting. As part of the Foundation's first initiative, they had been trained as therapy dogs destined for nursing homes, veteran centers, and children's hospitals throughout Louisiana, places where their special brand of comfort would help others heal, just as Grace had helped heal Emma and Ruth. A knock at the door announced Nathaniel Bellamy's arrival. When Ruth opened it, they found him standing unassisted, using only a cane for balance. The past months of aggressive treatment had taken a toll, leaving him thinner than before, but recent scans had shown promising results. His cancer had responded to treatment better than expected, giving him what his doctors cautiously called extended remission. "Good morning, Ruth," he greeted her warmly. "Is our guest of honor ready for her big day?" "See for yourself," Ruth replied, gesturing to where Grace stood regally amidst her energetic offspring. Bellamy's face lit up at the sight. He lowered himself carefully to one knee, ignoring the discomfort the movement clearly caused him. "There's my brave girl," he said softly as Grace padded over to greet him, pressing her head against his outstretched hand. "You're going to be the star of the show today." "Mr. Bellamy," Emma said excitedly, "Dr. Mitchell says Grace's heart is a lot stronger now. The medicine really worked." "Excellent news," Bellamy replied, easing himself back up with the help of his cane. "That calls for an extra treat." He produced a small bag of Grace's favorite organic snacks from his pocket, feeding her one with obvious delight. Outside, cars began arriving, guests for the Foundation's launch event. Through the cottage window, Emma could see Dr. Mitchell directing volunteers, while Miss Lillian, dressed in her Sunday best, arranged flowers on the reception tables. "We should head out," Ruth suggested, gathering her purse. "Emma, can you get the puppies on their leashes?" With practiced efficiency, Emma secured each puppy's leash, while Ruth attached Grace's. Together, the unusual family, 2 humans, 1 adult dog, and 6 puppies, made their way across the grounds toward the gathering crowd. The New Orleans Animal Welfare Foundation had been Nathaniel Bellamy's inspiration, born during those long nights helping with Grace's newborn puppies. Using a significant portion of his fortune, he had established the nonprofit organization dedicated to rescuing abused and abandoned animals, providing veterinary care to low-income pet owners, and training service and therapy dogs for those in need. Ruth now served as the Foundation's animal care director, overseeing a growing staff of caretakers, while Emma had been named youth ambassador, a role she took very seriously, speaking at local schools about animal welfare and responsible pet ownership. As they approached the ceremony area, Emma noticed the impressive turnout: local officials, business leaders, media, and many ordinary citizens who had followed Grace's story through Dr. Mitchell's social media updates over the months. "Quite a crowd," Ruth murmured nervously. "They're here because they believe in what we're doing," Bellamy reassured her. Grace's story touched people's hearts. It showed them what's possible when we choose compassion over indifference. The ceremony began with Dr. Mitchell welcoming the guests and introducing Nathaniel Bellamy, who made his way slowly to the podium. Though physically diminished by his illness, his voice remained strong as he shared his vision for the foundation and formally introduced Ruth as its director. When it came time for Emma's part in the program, she felt a moment of stage fright, looking out at the sea of unfamiliar faces. But then she felt Grace press against her leg, solid, warm, reassuring, and the nervousness melted away. 8 months ago, Emma began, her clear voice carrying across the lawn. "I found Grace by a landfill. She was sick and scared and had no hope left. I didn't have much hope either back then. My grandma and I had lost our home, and I thought things would never get better." She paused, looking down at Grace, who gazed back with complete trust. "But Grace taught me something important. She taught me that no matter how bad things seem, there's always a chance for a new beginning. She never gave up, even when she was at her weakest. And now look at her, healthy and strong, with 6 beautiful puppies who are going to help people who need comfort, just like Grace helped me." Emma gestured to where the puppies sat surprisingly well-behaved in a row, their matching bandanas making them look like a tiny, furry honor guard. "These puppies are going to nursing homes and hospitals. They're going to sit with people who are lonely or scared or hurting, just like I sat with Grace. And maybe they'll help those people feel brave again, the way Grace helped me." As she finished her speech, spontaneous applause erupted from the crowd. Miss Lillian's voice rose above the rest, calling out, "Tell it, child. Tell the truth." Emma smiled, her heart full. As she led Grace back to their seats, Nathaniel Bellamy leaned over to whisper, "Perfectly said, Emma. Your mother would be very proud." Later, as the formal ceremony concluded and guests mingled during the reception, a reporter approached Emma for an interview. "It's quite a story," the woman said, notepad in hand. The homeless girl, the abandoned dog, and the millionaire, all finding healing together. If you could sum it up in one sentence, what would you say was the most important part of this journey? Emma thought for a moment, her hand resting on Grace's head. The German shepherd leaned against her, a solid presence that had become as necessary to Emma as breathing. "The most important part," Emma said finally, "is that sometimes the ones who need saving the most are the ones who end up saving you." Grace looked up at her then, those intelligent amber eyes seeming to understand every word. In them, Emma saw reflected not just the journey they had taken together, but the one that stretched before them. A future neither of them could have imagined on that chilly autumn evening when a scared little girl had reached out to a dying dog, and in doing so, had saved them both. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and if you've watched this far, comment, "I watched all the way through," and share your thoughts about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the end screen. It's going to be really emotional.